What if I told you that the door of the Kaaba is not just a door? It is one of the most famous and valuable doors in the world. Covered with pure gold, standing on the sacred structure of the Kaaba. This door has been seen by millions of Muslims from around the world. But how much gold is actually used to make it? How much does it weigh? How much is it worth? Who makes it? And why is the door of the Kaaba positioned so high above the ground? Today we are going inside the fascinating history of the golden door of the Kaaba. And by the end of this video, you will understand why this small part of the Kaaba has such an extraordinary story. The door we see today is known as Bab al-Kaaba, meaning the door of the Kaaba. It is located on the eastern wall of the Kaaba in Masjid al-Haram in Makkah. For Muslims, the Kaaba is the sacred house dedicated to the worship of Allah. And its door is not simply an entrance. It is part of a structure that has been rebuilt, repaired, and preserved throughout centuries of Islamic history. But the Kaaba did not always have the magnificent golden door that we see today. The history of the Kaaba's door goes back much further. According to Islamic historical traditions, the Kaaba was rebuilt by Prophet Ibrahim, peace be upon him, and his son Ismail, peace be upon him. The structure was simple compared with the enormous building we see today. There were no massive marble floors, no huge modern courtyards, no enormous surrounding buildings, and certainly no modern elevator systems or advanced engineering. The Kaaba stood in the valley of Makkah, surrounded by mountains and desert. Over the centuries, the Kaaba underwent several reconstructions and repairs, and its door also changed. One of the most interesting facts is that the Kaaba has not always had a door positioned in exactly the same way. Historical accounts describe changes to the structure over different periods. And at certain points in history, the Kaaba even had more than one opening. The current door is located several feet above the ground. But why? Why would anyone design a door that cannot simply be walked through from ground level? There is an important historical reason. The elevated position helped protect the Kaaba from unwanted entry and from water entering the structure. It also made access more controlled. Historically, entering the Kaaba was not something that everyone could simply do whenever they wanted. The door provided controlled access to the interior of the sacred structure. Today, the door remains a powerful symbol of the Kaaba itself. But now let's talk about the part that catches everyone's attention. The gold. When people see the door of the Kaaba, one question immediately comes to mind. Is it actually made of gold? The answer is yes. The present Kaaba door is covered with gold. But this is not simply ordinary gold-colored paint. The door is made using precious metals and is covered with a substantial amount of gold. According to information published about the current door, approximately 280 kilograms of gold were used in its construction. That is an enormous amount. To put that number into perspective, imagine lifting a 280-kilogram object. That is heavier than many adult men. And this gold is not simply placed randomly over the surface. The door is carefully designed and decorated with intricate Islamic patterns and Arabic calligraphy. The craftsmanship is one of the reasons the door is considered one of the world's most remarkable architectural objects. But there is something even more interesting. The door is not made by simply taking a normal door and covering it with gold. It is a highly specialized piece of craftsmanship. The door is not made by simply taking a normal door and covering it with gold. It is a highly specialized piece of craftsmanship. The materials, structure, measurements, decoration, and finishing all have to work together. The result is a door that is both functional and symbolic. And because the Kaaba is one of the most sacred places in Islam, extraordinary care is taken with its maintenance. But how expensive is all that gold? This is where things become complicated. The value of gold changes constantly. Gold prices rise and fall depending on the international market. So there is no permanent dollar value for the gold used in the Kaaba's door. If someone calculates the value based only on the weight of the gold, the number can be extremely large. But the actual value of the door cannot be measured by gold alone. Why? Because this is not simply a pile of gold. It is a unique historical and religious object. Its craftsmanship, design, historical importance, and sacred location make it impossible to value like an ordinary gold product. In other words, you cannot simply take the door to a gold market and say, "How much is this worth?" Its significance goes far beyond the price of its materials. And this brings us to another fascinating question. Who actually makes the door? The craftsmanship involved in the Kaaba's door is highly specialized. The work requires experts in metalworking, gold decoration, calligraphy, engineering, and traditional Islamic design. Every detail has to be carefully measured. Every decorative element has to be precisely positioned. And every piece has to meet strict standards. The door also contains beautiful Arabic calligraphy. When you look closely, you can see that the decoration is not simply there to make the door look expensive. It is part of the artistic tradition associated with Islamic architecture. Arabic calligraphy has been used for centuries to decorate mosques, manuscripts, buildings, and sacred spaces. On the Kaaba, this artistic tradition reaches an extraordinary level. But there is another detail that many people notice. The door is not the only golden feature associated with the Kaaba. Above the Kaaba is another famous golden element. It is called the Mizab al-Rama, or the rainwater spout. The Mizab extends from the roof of the Kaaba and allows rainwater to flow away from the roof. Like the door, it has a distinctive golden appearance. So when you look at photographs of the Kaaba, you may see two very different golden features. The large golden door on the eastern wall, and the golden rainwater spout above the northern side of the Kaaba. Both have their own history and purpose. Now let's return to the door. Have you ever wondered why the Kaaba has such a small entrance compared with the enormous crowds surrounding it? The answer is simple. The door is not designed for millions of people to enter. The vast majority of pilgrims perform tawaf outside the Kaaba. The interior is a very different space. Only a limited number of people are allowed to enter the Kaaba on special occasions. Throughout Islamic history, rulers, custodians, and selected guests have sometimes entered the structure. The interior itself is much simpler than many people imagine. There are pillars supporting the roof, walls covered with marble and other materials, and a number of traditional architectural features. The inside of the Kaaba is not a huge room filled with treasures. It is relatively compact, and the famous golden door provides the controlled entrance. There is another remarkable historical detail. The Kaaba's door has been replaced and renewed at different points throughout history. The door that exists today is not necessarily the exact physical door that existed centuries ago. Just as the Kaaba itself has undergone rebuilding and restoration, its door has also been maintained and replaced when necessary. This is important because people sometimes imagine that every visible part of the Kaaba today has remained physically untouched for more than 1,000 years. That is not how historical buildings work. Sacred does not mean that the physical materials can never be repaired. In fact, preservation is one of the reasons the Kaaba continues to stand today. Generations have taken responsibility for maintaining it. And every generation has left its own chapter in the history of this extraordinary structure. Now imagine standing in front of the Kaaba. Millions of people around you, people from Asia, Africa, Europe, North America, South America, the Middle East, different languages, different cultures, different backgrounds, yet everyone facing the same sacred house. And in the middle of that enormous gathering, there is this remarkable golden door. It is physically small compared with the Kaaba, but visually it immediately catches your attention. Its gold surface reflects the lights of Masjid al-Haram. Its calligraphy represents centuries of Islamic artistic tradition, and its elevated position reminds us that the entrance to the Kaaba has always been controlled and protected. But perhaps the most important thing to remember is this. The gold itself is not what makes the Kaaba sacred. Muslims do not worship the door. They do not worship the gold. And they do not worship the Kaaba itself. Muslims worship Allah. The Kaaba is the sacred direction toward which Muslims face during prayer. The golden door is simply one part of the sacred structure. And this distinction is extremely important. The value of the door is not simply measured by how many kilograms of gold it contains. Its real significance comes from the history, faith, craftsmanship, and sacred place connected to it. So the next time you see a photograph of the Kaaba and notice its shining golden door, remember that you are looking at much more than an expensive piece of architecture. You are looking at a doorway connected to centuries of history, a doorway that has witnessed generations of pilgrims, a doorway that has been rebuilt, repaired, protected, and preserved, a doorway decorated with extraordinary craftsmanship, and a doorway that continues to stand on one of the most sacred structures in the world. But there is still another mystery. What exactly is inside the Kaaba? How many pillars are there? What does the ceiling look like? What is written on the walls? And why is the interior so different from what many people imagine? That is a story for another episode of Sacred History AI. If you enjoyed discovering the hidden history behind the golden door of the Kaaba, subscribe to Sacred History AI. Because in our upcoming documentaries, we will explore the Black Stone, Zamzam, the interior of the Kaaba, the history of Makkah, the sacred places of Medina, and the fascinating details that millions of people see, but rarely stop to understand. Sometimes a door is more than an entrance. Sometimes it is a doorway into history,